Alrighty, so I'm gonna just start us off with some general announcements, and then I guess we'll go ahead and jump in. And anyone who shows up late, it'll be fine. They can always watch the beginning part of our presentation because it is being recorded. I also ask that when you guys ask your questions, maybe you don't want to go into your personal details since there are several other people on the call, but if you can ask them in a more generic way, or you can ask me privately through email and I can always get those answers for you. I also plan to ask some questions at the end just to maybe it'll make it easier to kind of go into more specifics if it's not coming from a specific parent or specific family. But as far as the announcements go, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and learn about FAFSA and financial aid. It's very, very important. And I just want to, as a reminder, you're going to hear this over and over and over that the FAFSA is a graduation requirement. So I just want to reiterate that it is important and it's something that has to be checked off in order for your child to walk the stage in the spring. I was also asked to share with you guys, I think yesterday at a senior meeting, they were told that if they completed their FAFSA, they could earn a Rebel Rewards ticket. And this is going to be a ticket to a big end of year celebration party. I don't have all the details as to what the party will entail, but it sounded like when we were brainstorming at our faculty meeting that it was going to be a really good time. So just an extra incentive for you guys to complete that FAFSA process. And then every senior who completes the FAFSA will also have the opportunity to order a special cord to wear at graduation to show that they completed the FAFSA. So it just makes you look a little bit, more elite. You have more cords around your neck at graduation. So those are two incentives that have been put in place so far to encourage that this gets taken care of because it's such an important part of the graduation checklist of things to do, and because it helps your child have the best chance of their future plans getting paid for, not everything coming out of pocket. Lots of money gets left on the table that students could be getting for free, so we just want them to take advantage of every opportunity. So at this time I'll ask Miss Carmichael if she would like me to introduce her or if you want to introduce yourself.
I don't mind doing it. And how exciting. Your school is the first one that I've heard of who's going to be offering a celebration. And that's exciting because FAFSA can kind of be boring. So that's good. Good for you guys. I'm Ann Carmichael, and I'm a student financial aid consultant. I've been in the business for about 20 years, and I still don't know everything. But like Ms. Ennis, if I can't answer your question, I can find someone who will. Now, tonight we're going to have a conversation about the college financial aid process. And I want to mention that this session is sponsored by LELA, Louisiana's nonprofit resource for FAFSA completion and college access. I want you all, as I go through the different slides, to be thinking about questions you might want to ask. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer period, and I'll stay on the line as long as we need to. I'll also provide you with my contact information if you want to work with me individually. Now, we all know that college can be expensive, so let's talk about those costs. They're going to be your equipment, books and supplies, your personal expenses, room and board, and then the big one, tuition and fees. Now, oftentimes when you're doing your college research and you're looking on their websites, you might see tuition listed, but it's very important that you understand the total cost of attendance at each of the colleges that you're considering. And the good news is that financial aid is available from the U.S. Department of Education, the state of Louisiana, your college or career school, and then nonprofit and private organizations like LELA. There are 3 types of student financial aid: free money, which are grants and scholarships; borrowed money, like student loans; and earned money, like Federal work study. Now, federal student aid includes the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, federal work study, and direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. The federal grant family includes Pell Grants, which are for undergraduates with financial need, FSEOGs for undergraduates with exceptional financial need, service grants for students of military parents who died defending the country following 9/11, and then teach grants for students pursuing a teaching career. The Federal Work Study Program provides part-time jobs to help students pay for their education expenses. So when you say yes on the FAFSA to federal work study, the financial aid office will consider you for jobs available on their campus. And your earnings from those jobs will be paid directly to you, the student, and you should use those to pay for your college expenses. I want to note that these jobs look great on your first professional resume. So if you work, say in the financial aid office, and you're going to a 4-year college, that's 4 years of professional employment that you have to show on that first resume. Now, if you can't complete your college degree without student loans, then they are a good investment. But the important thing to remember is that you should only borrow what you need to complete your education. And it's important to understand the types of loans that you might be offered. The direct subsidized loans, which are based on financial need and no interest is charged while the student is in school. These are known as need-based loans. On the other hand, almost everyone is eligible for direct unsubsidized loans, regardless of your financial need. But remember that the interest begins to accrue on this loan once it's fully dispersed. When you can see that there is a big difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And you want to remember that you should always accept the subsidized loans before you accept the unsub. Now you could be offered both, so remember to take that unsub first. And you can remind yourself of this by saying that the U in unsub means that you always pay the interest on that loan. Now, if you do make the decision to accept loans, you always want to accept the federal student loans first, because payments aren't due until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed at a lower rate and no credit check is required. On the other hand, with private loans, sometimes lenders will ask the student to begin making payments while he's still in school. Interest rate might be much higher and it could be variable, and they almost always require a cosigner. Student financial aid can be used at 4-year public and private colleges, community colleges, career and technical schools, for part-time classes, and to take online college courses. And all federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the FAFSA. Now, you all know that it launched on October 1st, and it does so every year. And we want to make sure that you're completing this FAFSA as soon as possible, because financial aid is awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. You want to remember to pay close attention to your FAFSA deadlines that are set forth by your college, your state government, of course, the state of Louisiana, in the form of the TOPS scholarship. And yes, the FAFSA can be used as your TOPS application, and there is a FAFSA deadline to receive TOPS. Federal student aid has a deadline, and Ms. Ennis might have a deadline for you to submit your FAFSA to meet your graduation requirement. To be eligible for federal student aid and complete a FAFSA, the student must be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national, or have a green card, or have an arrival departure record, or a battered immigrant status, or a T visa. Now, if a student fits into one of these categories, but his parents do not, he can still submit. He will just enter zeros anywhere a parent's social security number is asked for. Now, remember that only students with social security cards can actually electronically sign the FAFSA. Everyone else will have to manually print a signature page and mail it into the Department of Education. Now, you want to begin the FAFSA process by collecting all of the documents you need to complete the form. And if you do this, it really should take no longer than 30 to 45 minutes. Those documents include the student and parents' social security cards, because you must report your name and number exactly as it's printed on your most recent card. The student and parents' 2020 federal income tax returns, if you filed one. If you don't have a copy of your tax return, now is the time to contact your tax preparer for a duplicate. Student and parents' 2020 W-2s, because there's information on this form that might not be found on your federal tax return. And then bank statements and records of investments, because you will be asked to report the balances of these accounts as of the date you submit your FAFSA. You'll begin by creating your federal student aid ID. You'll hear it talked about and referred to as the FSA ID. This allows the student and one of his parents to identify themselves electronically when accessing the FAFSA. It's going to consist of a username and password that each of you will create, and it should reflect only your personal information. Each student and one of his parents needs to provide information and create their FSA ID. Now, oftentimes we see that a student might add mom or dad's mobile phone to his ID, even as an alternate phone. That's going to cause trouble signing the FAFSA, because that's considered shared information. So only use your own info. And students, use your personal email addresses. Don't create your ID with your school account, because once school's out, you'll no longer have access to that email account, and federal student aid will have no way to get in touch with you. Your FSA ID username and password is your official electronic signature, and it's legally binding. So you want to record it, but keep it in a very safe place. If you don't have access to a computer when you're ready to start your FAFSA, download the FAFSA mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and it's really easy to use to submit your FAFSA on your mobile device. Or you can complete the FAFSA using the web-based version at fafsa.gov. Or you can use both, because information will be integrated once it's time to sign and submit your FAFSA. And let's say that the student prefers the mobile app and wants to enter the student information there, but the parents prefer the desktop. That's fine. Either way, everything will be integrated into one form when it's time to submit. You want to begin by identifying your role when accessing the FAFSA. If you're the parent, however, and you have permission to complete the entire FAFSA for your student, select I am the student and want to access the FAFSA form. You'll begin the FAFSA by logging in with the student's FSA ID in that case, because the FAFSA is the student's application for federal student aid. The parent FSA ID will be used later in the process if you choose to transfer your tax information from the IRS and pop it into the FAFSA, and then again to sign your student's FAFSA. It's important to note that the high school class of 2022 should complete the 2023 FAFSA, because that's the academic year that the student is applying for financial aid. And that is the application you need to complete to meet your graduation requirement. Now, you can also note when you log in here that you can see if your FSA ID information has been verified by Social Security Administration. If you do not see that little check mark that shows matched, that you can match with Social Security, you really need to go back and manage your FSA ID and find out exactly what's going on. Perhaps you entered some information in error. Next, you will be asked to create a save key, which is a short series of letters and numbers or both, and it serves as an additional layer of security. So if you don't complete the FAFSA in one sitting, you want to save it and come back later, you will always need that save key to re-enter. So make sure you're recording that one as well. There are 7 sections that should be completed before submitting your FAFSA, and the information that you use to create the student and parent FSA IDs must match exactly what you enter into the FAFSA, or you're going to have trouble signing and submitting. This means that your names, your social security numbers, date of birth, email addresses, phone numbers are going to have to be entered in the FAFSA exactly as you entered in the ID. Now, parents who have older children who've already created an FSA ID for themselves, I always encourage you to go back into your ID and just do a quick glance to make sure that you do not need to update your information in the FSA ID. These sections are going to include the student demographics, where students will be asked to provide their social security number, name as listed on the social security card, date of birth, personal email address, home address, residency status, and gender. School selection, where you will list the name of your high school and the name of the colleges that you want your FAFSA data to be sent to, plus your housing plans on each of those campuses. Next, the dependency status section, where the student will be asked to consider a list of questions that are going to determine whether he is independent or dependent upon his parents for FAFSA purposes. He'll be asked to report the number of dependents living in his household and his parents' education level to determine whether he is a first-generation college student. Next, you'll move to the parent demographics section, where you will report the parents' social security numbers, the name of each parent, the marital status, and their email addresses. The parent financials, where the parent will report his working wages from 2020, any federal benefits that he receives, and his savings and investment account balances. And then student financials, which mirror exactly what the parents are being asked. So many times I'll be working with a parent who says, you know, I'm having trouble. I've already been asked to provide my working wages and federal benefits and account balances. So always make sure that you know what section you're in. It'll show up toward the top of the page if you're providing student or parent information. Then it's almost time to sign and submit, but review your FAFSA summary page, because this report reflects each question you were asked in the FAFSA and shows your answer to it. Now is the time to make any changes that you need to make before you send it on to your financial aid offices. Now we're on the signature page. The student and one of his parents needs to sign the FAFSA, preferably with the FSA ID that you created. If you submit your FAFSA without these signatures, the FAFSA will be incomplete and the processing of your financial aid will be on hold until you sign and resubmit. Now, if you've listed 2 parents on your FAFSA, You'll be asked which one has the FSA ID. So make sure you're noting who you list as parent 1 and who you list as parent 2, and which of those parents created their FSA ID. I want to tell you that as you move through the FAFSA, you are going to see a question mark beside each question. You can always click on that question mark for a more detailed description. You can use hyperlinks that are provided within the FAFSA that might explain some legal or financial aid terms that you haven't heard of before. You can call Federal Student Aid for assistance, or you can contact me on Leela's FAFSA helpline. Also, only the colleges that you list on the FAFSA in that school selection section are going to consider you for student financial aid. Federal student aid is not going to send out your personal information to every college across the country. You need to give them permission. So you want to add all of the schools that you're considering. Even if you haven't completed the admissions process yet, go ahead and list them on your FAFSA now. The financial aid office is going to hold onto your FAFSA data until the admissions office lets them know that you've been accepted at their college, and then they will begin to work on a financial aid offer for you. You can add up to 10 colleges at a time. If you're planning to apply to more than 10 colleges, there are instructions in this section on how to do so. But if you need help, I'm happy to work with you. Now, as I mentioned, to determine whether the student is a dependent or an independent student, he will be asked to consider these statements. Will you, the student, be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which you're applying for financial aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? Will you be working on a graduate degree during the academic year in which you're applying for aid? Do you have children or other dependents other than children or a spouse who receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? So this excludes those of you who are going on to boot camp and perhaps basic training. You're still considered a dependent student unless you can answer the questions as shown here. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a ward or a dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor? And this is one of the hyperlinks if you're not quite sure what that term means. Or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? And it's important to note that legal custody is not always considered legal guardianship. So make sure you have your documentation with you before you answer this question. And then the last one, are you an unaccompanied youth who's homeless, or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Now, students who fall into this category need to, and that you've been identified by your school district, it's best to talk to your counselor about this and get copies of that documentation before you graduate, because the financial aid office will ask you for them. If you can answer yes to just one of these questions and provide a legal document supporting that claim, then you're considered independent for FAFSA purposes, and you will not be required to provide parental information. Everyone else will. Now, if you live with grandparents or other relatives who are not your legal guardians and they have not legally adopted you, you must still provide information about your biological parents. So if those who you live with are your legal guardians, then you don't have to provide their information because you're an independent student and you don't have to provide any parental information. If those that you live with have legally adopted you, then they should be listed on your FAFSA, because They are your legal parents. And for purposes of the FAFSA, you're not considered independent just because you file your own taxes or you choose to live alone and support yourself. You still must provide information about your legal parents. And then the most commonly asked question that we receive is, which parent or parents should I list on the FAFSA? The rule of thumb is that the parent or parents that you've lived with the longest in the 12 months prior should be listed on your FAFSA. So if you live with both of your biological parents, then you want to list both of them. But if the parent you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months is either separated, divorced, or was never married, you should list only that legal parent on your FAFSA. Unless that parent is remarried, then you must report information about your step parent, because federal student aid is trying to determine the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the 12 months prior to submitting your FAFSA. Now, if you're identified as a dependent student, but your parents will not provide their information on your FAFSA, you can still submit a FAFSA by stating, I'm unable to provide their information. But remember, by doing this, you're only going to be offered unsubsidized federal loans. You will not be considered for any of the grants, none of the free money. So if you must submit your FAFSA without parental information, contact the financial aid office at the colleges you're applying to and talk to them about your situation. Just like Mrs. Ennis, they are there to help you, so don't hesitate to reach out to them. And to expedite the processing of your federal student aid, the student and parents should use the IRS data retrieval tool if you filed a 2020 income tax return. By using this tool, you're going to greatly diminish your chances of being selected for verification by your college financial aid office. You're also going to save yourself some time because colleges are going to ask you to verify that manual information that you're entering by contacting the IRS, requesting a tax transcript, and sending a transcript to each of the colleges that you're applying to. If you do choose to use the IRS tool, you'll see this screen and you will select Proceed to the IRS. Once you're in the IRS portal, grab your 2020 federal income tax return and enter your name and address exactly as it's printed on the return. Even if your name is misspelled, and we've seen tax preparers misspell people's names, it must be entered in this portal exactly as it's printed on that return. Say you've moved since 2020, you still need to provide the address that was used on that 2020 return, because the IRS wants to make sure that the person that's in their website is the person who filed the return. And then it's time to sign and submit. And once you do, you will receive a confirmation page. This is a pop-up. This is one of the few times that you'll see all of this information in one place. You'll see your confirmation date and time. And yes, we've had students who called to say, my college said they didn't get my FAFSA. You can provide this to your financial aid office to prove that, yes, you did submit it. There's a data release number that you can give them if you want them to make any corrections that they might require you to make. You will see the next steps that you need to take to complete the financial aid process. You'll see a list of the colleges that you have entered and will receive your FAFSA data, and you can get an understanding of what your expected family contribution will be. Once the FAFSA is processed, which usually takes 3 to 5 days, it is then shared with your colleges. And as I mentioned, they will all begin to work on an award offer, and they will be able to identify any aid that you might be eligible to receive. Now, if you want to add a school or change your contact information, just the simplest way is to log back into FAFSA.gov, make those corrections, give the FAFSA another look through, and then remember to sign and submit it again. If your family's financial situation has changed since 2020, contact your financial aid counselors because they have the ability to adjust your aid by using their own professional judgment. The Department of Education gives out lump sums of federal money to every college around the country. And each individual financial aid office will determine what your financial aid offer will be. So if you've had a loss of income, someone's been laid off, or you've had some unexpected medical expenses, these are all good reasons to contact your financial aid counselor because they're trying to determine your net price. That's the amount that you're going to owe to pay for your academic year. They'll take your costs, the cost of attendance at their college, and subtract any grants and scholarships that they can find for you to attend their school. Each school will then send the student an award letter. They're not all going to look alike, but they all should show that college's cost of attendance and line item any grants, scholarships, work study, and student loans that they can offer you. Once you do make your decision, accept your financial aid in this order. Scholarships and grants, because this is free money that does not have to be repaid. Federal work study, because you've earned this money and don't have to pay it back. And then student loans. Now, this is borrowed money that you have to repay and with interest. Scholarships are gifts that don't have to be repaid. So now is the time to begin your search. They're offered by colleges, employers, private and nonprofit groups, religious and social organizations. Some are merit-based, some are based on financial need. But applying for and winning these scholarships is going to reduce your cost of your education. And that means minimizing your student loan debt. This year, LELA will award a $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship for students who've completed the FAFSA and are attending a Louisiana high school, and a $1,000 Choose Louisiana scholarship for students who choose to attend a college in the state of Louisiana. You can find out the details of this at lela.org, or you can email me directly and I'll be happy to send you the application. Now, for students who need additional help paying for college after you've accepted all of your scholarships, grants, federal and state aid, LELA does administer a nonprofit education loan product called LELA Choice, and it's for Louisiana residents only. So you can find out more about that at lelachoice.org. And remember, to keep receiving financial aid, you must complete a FAFSA every year that you're in college. So mark your calendars for next October 1st when you'll complete your FAFSA for your sophomore year. We know this is a lot of information in a 30-minute period. So we have again published a FAFSA completion guide and workbook, and this one's for the class of 2022. It's free for all Louisiana high school students. So if you don't already have an electronic copy, you can visit lela.org to download yours, or you can email me directly and I'll provide you with one. Now, make sure you're jotting down LELA's FAFSA helpline, because whether you have a question about general financial aid or a FAFSA question, or you want me to stay on the line with you while you complete your FAFSA, I'm happy to do that. And if you want to begin a dialogue with me, please feel free to email me at carmichael@lela.org. As Mrs. Ennis mentioned, I'm going to provide a audio copy of this presentation if you want to take another look at it. And I would also be happy to send you the slides. Just contact me directly. So let's use the remainder of this time to talk about any questions or concerns that you might have. And you can use the Zoom chat box if you'd like, and we'll go through those. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question directly, please feel free to do that. I would love to know if anybody has already submitted their FAFSA.
Ma'am,
Yes.
I've actually been trying to work on my son's FAFSA for the past hour and a half, and I keep getting to where we're entering the parent financials. And it has the IRS retrieval tool. Well, every time, and then granted, it may be a lock because I'm doing it from my son's Chromebook. My laptop is currently not working. But every time I hit that link to bring me out of the FAFSA form website to the IRS data retrieval tool, it says that it's not available at this time. Now, the school Chromebooks tend to block a lot of availability to go outside of, I guess, the confines of what they want on their Chromebook. Do you know if that's one of them?
I don't know, Ms. Dennis. Do you know anything about that? And I have another suggestion after we hear from Ms. Dennis.
I was going to say, I don't have like a list of what they've told me is blocked, but I think that's probably what it is. This might be what Ms. Carmichael was going to suggest, but if you downloaded the app, you might be able to go through that part on the phone.
Okay.
That
And
is
what
exactly.
the app is just called literally FAFSA, FAFSA app, or
It's called My Student Aid.
My Student Aid.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I kind of missed that part.
No problem. And you know what? We've also had, I mean, so many people were trying to get on the platform on October 1st. People were having trouble on the website, and they found that the app is, for some reason, a little more stable. So give that a try.
Okay, and I guess I just need to clarify something. So I have been doing this under where when you first choose, it says I'm a parent filling it out. So is my son supposed to log on? Does he fill stuff out on his own as well?
That's what federal student aid recommends for privacy issues. You know, they know some parents don't want the students to see their info, and some students don't want the parents for some reason to see theirs. But you can log in as the parent and complete the parent section. He can log in and complete his section.
Okay.
But what worries me about that is that you never really see the entire form. So if you had his permission to look at the entire form, you might be able to check and see some errors maybe that you could correct before it's submitted.
Okay, well, that won't be an issue. So I'll just have him log in and we'll go through it together after, assuming I can ever get through the tax information part.
Yes, that was going to be my suggestion. As long as there's not an issue between the parent and the child, I think the easiest thing is for the student to just open it up from their perspective and work through the whole thing with their parent next to them.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you. Hopefully, once I download the app, hopefully it's just a Chromebook issue because I just, I'm having a lot of trouble with the tax information part of it. So I can't seem to get past that.
I know that's frustrating.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Check the chat box.
Okay.
All right. My student is going to a Christian university that does not accept federal student aid. Do we leave the school choice section blank, or do we choose a school? That's a great question, because you must add at least one college on the FAFSA to be able to move on to the next section. So I would encourage you to add another school. And we always encourage students when we're working with them and directly to add as many schools as they ever considered, because you just don't ever know, what their decision is going to be, and they can change their minds in the middle of the summer. So be sure and add several schools. You're welcome. You know, the FAFSA is not difficult, it's tedious. So the best thing to do is just take your time, answer one question at a time. If you have any issues with the question, if you're not quite sure what they're asking for, just go over to that question mark. It's amazing what they've done in the help and hints section. As a matter of fact, if you're manually entering your tax information and they tell you enter your adjusted gross income, now you open up that help and hints with the question mark, it'll show you a copy of a tax return from 2020. It'll highlight the line they want you to enter in that field. And then, you know, it just makes it that plain. And remember, I think I mentioned during our time tonight, if you're a parent who already has an FSA ID, you are going to use that to sign the FAFSA for your student graduating in 2020. But always go back and update it. Sometimes your email address may have changed or your mobile phone has changed. Check your FSA ID before you begin your FAFSA.
Do you know if there is still a way, if they have multiple kids in college at the same time, where they only have to enter the information once?
That's a great question. And yes, they can still do that. For parents who have multiple children in college, get started on one of the students, complete it, submit it. But on that confirmation pop-up page that I went over with all your data about when you submitted it, your the date and time and what colleges were added, on that page itself, you'll see a link at the bottom. It'll say, oh, we see that you stated that you have more than one student who's going to be in college this coming year. Do you want to begin the second FAFSA? And if you choose to do that, it's going to pull all the parent information over into the second FAFSA, and all you really will have to do is provide the student info for that second child. Oh, here's a one that's interesting. Her daughter already created the FSA ID, and I bet they did those at school, Ms. Ennis.
Yes, yes, we did.
And she wants a little help on creating hers. I always tell students that we work with at school, you're the pro now, you created your ID, go home and help a parent. So ask the student to help you. And I'm also going to put the web address. I can't talk and type. I'm going to enter this, the web address. You'll go to fsaid.ed.gov. And then it will walk you through the process. It will ask you your name, your social security number. It's very self-explanatory. But if you want to call me on the FAFSA helpline or email me directly to set up an appointment, I'm happy to work with you. I'm sure Ms. Ennis is as well.
Yes.
How do we find a FAFSA ID? My last child went to school several years ago, and that's a great question. If you know that you have already created an ID, but you don't recall it, when the student logs into the FAFSA, remember the page that I showed you that it showed that your social security number was matched? On that same page, you're going to see Manage My FSA ID. You can click there. And instead of creating an FSA ID, you will just say, I forgot my password or I forgot my username, and then you'll be walked through the steps to reset, to retrieve your username and reset your password. And it's at this same, or you can go directly to this website that I just provided you, fsaid.ed.gov and manage your FSAID. And again, if you need help, give me a call. Yes.
Do you know what year they started using FSAID?
Do you know I do? Because someone called me just yesterday and he's like, I know I created one back in 2014 and it was in 2015.
Okay. So if your older kid is beyond that time frame, they will have an outdated PIN number situation, then you will still have to create an FSAID.
That's right. If you were in college and you received federal student aid, you created a PIN. And if your child was graduated or went to college before 2015, you've got that PIN. That's now been retired. You now need to create an FSAID.
The only other question I have is if we could maybe go back to the screen about students who do or don't have a social security number for the students we have with Spanish speaking parents and things like that. There was a couple of different columns and
yes,
not all of those were clear to me.
All right, you back up. And I always encourage the parents that I'm working. And I think I lost you all.
Just for a moment.
Yeah, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to get back to that screen. A lot of times the students really do need to work through this with their parents. Because a lot of this documentation I'm not even familiar with, but here we are. And I'm going to provide you with the slide too. So you can be, of course, a US citizen or a US national. And I'll let you read through.
So I guess the biggest question is, if a student doesn't have a social security number, there's still a way for them to complete this?
Absolutely. They will use the numbers that are printed on these specific documents, their green card, arrival departure record, battered immigrant status, or the T visa. It's still the same number of numerals.
Okay.
That's what they'll enter in their FAFSA. Now, remember the question that says that at the beginning of the FAFSA, it says, I am a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. All of these other categories, those that don't have social security cards, are considered eligible non-citizens.
Okay.
But these groups cannot create an FSAID. Only students and parents with social security cards can create the FSAID. So although those in these other categories can submit a FAFSA, they will have to provide a wet signature to the Department of Ed. So on that signature page where it says use your FSAID to sign, there also is a statement toward the bottom that says select another option to sign. Then they would print a signature page, sign it, and mail it into the Department of Education. So if a student has a social security card and they have an FSAID, but the parents don't, the student can sign with his FSAID, print the parent's signature page, mail it in, submit the FAFSA, and then once the Department of Ed receives that manual signature, they'll match it up with the student's FAFSA that's been signed electronically. And at that time, they'll process the aid.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. What a great group. I always have such great questions from you all. Miss Ennis, you've been doing this for a long time.
It seems like it, yes.
Oh, let me check. I see a note here. Okay. Okay, this one says neither of us. I'm assuming the student or the parent can figure out how to create the parent ID, or maybe the two parents. We just keep going around in circles. So if you want to contact me, or you want to make an appointment with Miss Ennis to help you create that FSA ID, I'm sure we're both willing to help you with that.
Absolutely.
Remember the Leela's FAFSA helpline, or if you email me and tell me a time that you'd like me to call to help you create your ID, we can set that up. You're welcome. Okay, and I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Ennis to wrap up the meeting.
Okay, well, I thank you guys for coming to the information session. I hope you found it beneficial and that you will spread the word that it will get posted as soon as possible on Google Classroom for people who are not able to attend. If you have further questions or in more detailed questions, you can reach out to me or Miss Carmichael. Just in case some of you were not here at the very beginning and are still here with us now, I just want to reiterate that this is a graduation requirement and that to incentivize this process, the school is going to be giving the seniors who complete the FAFSA a Rebel Rewards ticket so that they can be a part of a big end of year bash. Also, they will be eligible to order an additional cord to wear at graduation that will show that they completed the FAFSA requirement. And then the final thing is once you and your child have completed the whole FAFSA process and you receive the email that says it's been completed and submitted, I need for everyone to forward that email to me so I can keep a running record and update in JPAMs as students complete that graduation process. So I have nothing further. If no one else has any questions.
This question might be for you, Ms. Ennis. Where can we find local and state scholarships and grants for students who are attending colleges outside of the state?
So I keep an updated scholarship list on my Google Classroom. It also gets posted and updated periodically on the school website. I will be honest, the majority of them are for more local and in-state things, but as we get closer to spring semester, there may be more broad availability for scholarships. Additionally, um, there are websites like fastweb.com, scholarships.org. There's several of them mentioned at the top of my scholarship page where families can create a profile and kind of put in all their personalized, detailed information. And then you will get emails and updates about nationally based scholarships and things of that nature that wouldn't necessarily come across my desk or through my email. So that would be one place to start. And then specifically, you want to look at that particular college and what sorts of aid they offer.
All right, I don't see any more questions, but you know who to contact if you do have them after the presentation. So thanks again for having me. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting, and good luck to everybody and have a great senior year. Thank you, Ms. Ennis.
Thank you.